Guys, we are here, the top 5 of the top 90 of the 90s. So excited. We are finally here. And oh my God, I can't believe who we have on the show today. It's someone that may have been there working on one of these albums in the 90s. And I'll let Nathaniel do the honors of introducing.
Yeah, I mean, this man has worked with so many people, Mick Jagger, Rod Stewart, Coolio, just to name a few. Of course, joining us today is Mr. Patrick MacDougall. How are you doing, man?
I'm good. Thank you, guys. Great to be here.
Dude,
Uh,
we're just so happy to have you, man. I mean, especially someone with your experience and your knowledge in the industry. I feel like this is going to be one hell of an episode talking about these records.
Thanks. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, this is a true honor, man. So let's not waste any time. Let's get right to it at number 5.
In Utero by Nirvana from 1993, the follow-up to their ever so successful Nevermind. And this really was a change of pace for Nirvana because, of course, Kurt Cobain was trying to get away from the polished sound that Butch Vig brought to Nevermind, and he brought in Steve Albini. Of course, worked with the Pixies, and that's what really drew him in. And really, this is obviously Nirvana's last studio album, unfortunately, right before the death of Kurt Cobain. And really, you can see kind of like his mindset at this time on a lot of these songs, especially him being sick of the critics criticizing him, which obviously comes out in a lot of these songs, especially Heart-Shaped Box, which is my favorite song on this album. And I just think one of Nirvana's absolute best songs. And I just love that hang wing, I got a new complaint. That chorus is so iconic, and Kurt's voice on this song especially is so raw, and in some way kind of controlled, because as we've mentioned, he wasn't the technically greatest vocalist ever, but absolutely love that song. And then of course you have songs like Rape Me, which is such a powerful statement, anti-rape message, though a lot of people didn't get it at the time. And I don't know how. I mean, if you know anything about Kurt Cobain, he was really, really very forward thinking, very, very supportive of women, which, especially for alt rock in the 90s, is not something you usually see. So you got to respect him for that. And then, of course, you have great songs like Dumb. I think yet again, Kurt kind of like diving into his own insecurities on that track. And of course, that Proclamation, or Maybe I'm Just Happy. Just so ironic in every way possible, and also in a very unfortunate way. And then, of course, even songs, I gotta love songs like Milk It, where it's like he's singing like so atonally, and it's just so disturbing, quite honestly. So many, Penny Royalty, yet again, another one. But I think All Apologies is really the most, even though it's not my favorite song on the album, it's by far the most disturbing. And basically, many people read it as Kurt Cobain's suicide note. And I mean, what a way to end really their last proper studio album. It really is, I think, not my favorite album. Like, I've become so close to loving this, but I think the production is just too raw on this thing, where I feel like obviously Nevermind was so controlled and so cleaned up, and I feel like with Kurt being the type of vocalist he was, I feel like it kind of holds it back from me truly loving this album. I would have probably put it like a few notches down. Maybe I could respect it seeing top 25 or so, but I mean, regardless, it's such an iconic record. And I think, just for that, where he was at personally, I think that it definitely deserves a spot on this list without question.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, definitely, I think it deserves to be in the top 10. I mean, this
Mhm.
is an absolute classic. And I think they set out to do exactly, or they accomplished exactly what they set out to do, which was to be more raw. And Steve Albini really helped with that. And I think there's a ton of gems on here, like Milk It, as you mentioned. Scentless Apprentice, which is one of Dave Grohl's first writings there. And, just there's some, even Tourette's. I love him just screaming nonsense. And like
Yeah.
only Cobain could pull that kind of thing off. And, sure, he wasn't the greatest vocalist in the world, but man, not many people could scream like him and do it in key in such a way that it was so compelling. And all apologies. Yeah. One of the greatest album closers of all time. And what a way to sum up their memory, that all in all is all we are refrain at the end. And still, amidst all the crazy heaviness of this album, you still get those beautiful melodies and harmonies, and Chris Novoselic's melodic bass playing. I mean, and some absolute acoustic classics like Dumb and Penny Royalty. So yeah, absolutely love it, and so glad it's here. So Patrick, what do you have to say about this one, man?
Uh, you guys are so good at this. You're like so into to all the every aspect of it. I will tell you from hearing it after Nevermind, yeah, it was a different vibe. Um, I remember kind of feeling like, oh, why are they going this direction? I didn't dislike it. I was more questioning why they made the decision to go
Mhm.
this choice. And I I love the rawness. I'm kind of, I think Albini's ridiculous. I think, his the choices to work that way. I mean, it's awesome. He still works the same way today. Still all analog,
Yep.
still it's still great. And it's a vibe. It's a vibe. I also remember feeling like there was a I think the songs were feeling like, man, we're getting we're getting crap from critics. We're getting love mail, hate mail, right? Like it's like there's all this attention on us, and that's not who they were to start with.
Right.
And it seems to me that it was kind of a response to that. And certainly in retrospect, it is maybe very obviously that. But at the
Yeah.
time, it was kind of it felt like a pushback, like no, no, no.
Mhm.
But now, again, in retrospect, it really was, and one of the most iconic album closers maybe ever.
Yeah.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
And I forgot to mention Radio Friendly Unit Shifter, which I think is a really underrated track. Just especially if you see them perform that live, like at the New Year's Eve thing in '93, where Cobain's just essentially making noise on his guitar for most of the song, and it just works. And Dave Grohl's drumming, of course, is tremendous.
Right. I guess to your point about the rawness, though, I do want to say I think it's really
Mhm.
because Kurt Cobain, when he's screaming on this album, it isn't. I feel like it isn't as tuneful, and maybe that's just my perfect pitch speaking. I've
Sure.
really been wanting to like come back to this album again. I gave it one go around after I heard it the first time, but it is certainly one that I'm always kind of like, oh, I want to come back and revisit it. So I definitely do agree it's a great record. I don't know if I agree with it being above a lot of the other ones we've talked about, but it's undeniably a classic. And as we said, unfortunate what unfolded in the aftermath.
Yeah, for sure. Well, nonetheless, great pick, guys. So now at number 4, 10 by Pearl Jam from 1991, the grunge hit. I'm from Seattle. I mean, this was such a huge record, of course, catapulted into the stratosphere off of the backs of Nirvana, but this came out prior to that in the summer of 91. And oh my God, I mean, for me, this was kind of a life-changing record. I mean, for all those who kind of, worship at the altar of Eddie Vedder as a vocalist, Alive, Even Flow. I mean, most of their best songs are on this record. It's undeniable. And it's almost indisputable to say that their debut album is their best just on that alone. I mean, Jeremy, Black, one of the greatest ballads of all time. um just the A sides alone. Then you've got these gems: Garden, Porch, Oceans, Release, mostly one word titles, but there's just so much emotion throughout this album. And of course, it's well known that Eddie was grappling with father issues on multiple songs on this album, like Release and Alive. And it just comes through in such a striking way that I think it really struck a chord, not just with 13-year-old me at the time, but so many other kids who are having issues with, parents going through divorce or whatever the case may be. And of course, ultimately in the song Jeremy, where that's coming to a real true life story, just tragedy. There's not many other bands that could tackle those kind of subjects in the way that they did, that made it feel not just relevant, but poignant and personal. And I think it's just one of the greatest rock records of all time. And I'm so excited for who we have on the show. But Nathaniel, I know
Yeah.
you have some things to say here.
I do. And I'll say that that's really beautiful, man. And I'm so glad that you have that connection to the record. So I certainly don't want to take that away from you, but as you said, the people who worship at the feet of Eddie Vedder's voice, I am not one of them.
I know, I
And
know.
and I think, Anthony Fantano, I think, said it best. His style of singing, he thinks, is like one of the worst like styles as created for the
Sure, sure.
and I just, I've never gotten understood fully like what he's saying on some of these songs, not like lyrically, but I just feel like his voice, I just can't really get invested in it because of the way he's singing. But I've always found, look, the influence wise, this album has it, that is for sure. But I've always found this album a bit overrated because I think musically, obviously, Eddie Vedder's writing the lyrics and whatnot, and the band's putting it together. But I've always felt like and I was saying this when I was actually like kind of mad about Pearl Jam earlier. I always found their melodies to be a bit awkward, and you can kind of tell that the lyrics were written after. And that's not to say the lyrics are bad, but I think it is definitely not as seamless as some of the other collaborations that have come together on this list. So, look, I mean, I love Alive. Might be the best song on there. Of course, you got to respect Even Flow. Jeremy, even though I think the melody's a bit awkward, as you said, what he was talking about, the real life tragic story, gotta respect them for putting that out there. I wouldn't have this in the top 10, but I admit that I am in the minority here. But I
Hey,
still think,
that's your professor down there, right?
yeah, I know. I will say I still think it's overrated, but Patrick, you can tell me how wrong I am now.
Yeah,
Hey
please.
man, it's art. It's not wrong. You
Yeah.
can't be wrong. It's art, right? It's like if we're going by voice quality and easy listening ability, Bob Dylan wouldn't have sold a record, Neil Young wouldn't have sold a record, right? It's like
Yeah.
so
No.
so it isn't about that. It's about the whole package, and it turns some people on and it doesn't turn other people on.
Yes.
That's everybody. This is art. That's the beauty of having these conversations. Um, I was working with Brian Malouf, who's great mixer, engineer, producer at the time, and Brian Brian was like, oh, "Yeah, we got this. We're gonna mix the singles for this record," and we're like, "Okay." So it was just another day. There was no like, because
Yeah.
there was no big hype yet. Um, So we just started digging into the tracks. They were already recorded, so we were only mixing at the time.
Mhm.
And it was Even Flow and Alive. And we're like, wow. Like
Yeah.
it's one of those moments like you remember hitting play on the tape and pulling up raw tracks and just like, wow, this is really good. Like the energy was there. Like they captured the energy of this band. And uh, I I I want to I'm trying to recall exactly how this went down, but you know, we're like kind of singing along to Alive, and you're like, this is a if you just take the melody, and I'm surprised to hear you think it's so awkward because it's a pop,
Just some of them, yeah.
you know, like da 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 da. Like
Yeah.
if you just hum along to it, it's a pop tune. Now, because you put, and I'm pretty sure that was what Brian was saying, was like you put torn jeans and a flannel shirt on, and it's grunge.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Right.
if you take it into a different realm, it's a different vibe, or a different singer, or how it happens to be. But the melody, like it worked, and it worked, I believe, wholeheartedly because of the timing too. You know, it was the end of the '80s.
Yeah.
This
Right.
stuff was coming out, and we're saying it's time to move on. You know,
I agree there.
it's time for the hair bands to go away, and that's really what was taking place.
Yeah, and it's not like these guys didn't rock. I mean, Mike McCready, his
Oh,
guitar
yeah.
solo on Alive is freaking incredible.
Freaking
The
incredible.
instrumentals are great.
Oh
This
yeah.
whole album.
So during this few days, they played the Palladium in Hollywood, and we went, as you know, because they're like, "Oh, you got to come to see us," and we walk in, and it's all guys,
Of course.
right? It's like
Right.
it's incredible. It's like,
A real sausage fest. Yeah.
Yeah.
and so as the sound audio geeks that we are, we kind of make your way over to the front of house position, and they came out on stage, and there was probably, I don't think there were 400 people there, maybe 500 people there, and they tore it up. The guy mixing front of house, I wish I knew his name because he killed it. It sounded great. The band was great. We're like, why isn't this place just bang? Right?
Yeah.
It was shocking. It wasn't just overflow of people. But again, this was the beginning. This was before they blew up. So it was a very interesting time. Very interesting time. Totally, you know, grateful for the opportunity to have been part of it, because it was, you know, you didn't, again, you don't know it when you're there,
Right.
Exactly.
but to see it blow up afterwards, you're like, wow, it's really cool.
So it was just those two tracks, or there was a third?
We did a third, and maybe that was on the single soundtrack for the movie.
Oh, so like State of Love and Trust or Breathe, maybe?
Breathe. It was Breathe.
Oh, nice.
That's what it was.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what it was. I knew we did three.
I always felt like those two songs could have easily been on the album because they're also so good.
Yeah, they're great. Absolutely great.
Yeah. Even the
So did you-
B-sides. Yeah.
Did you get to interact with the guys like outside of the record? Or?
Just no, because
No?
that was at the beginning, and they were gone. They were touring hardcore. So as a matter of fact, Eddie never came into the studio for the mix. Just the other guys did. Mike came in. So we never met Eddie in person.
Wow.
Gotcha. Yeah. But you met like Stone and some of the other guys, and
yeah, the rest of the band came in. Yeah. It was but they were, again, like, we got to go do radio, we got to go do this thing, we got a concert tomorrow night, so we got to do this. So they were busy guys. They were doing it, and the album was done, and we were mixing the singles. So this is the way it worked. Still does today. An album comes out or is created. It's not out yet. Created, right. And they go, oh, let's have this. Let's take this song or these three songs. We'll have them remixed. We weren't adding parts. We didn't add parts to these. That's not that kind of a remix,
right?
You know, not like a reproduction kind of or additional production. I mean, it was a better mix. A better mix. You know.
I always found it interesting that they went back and did was it a Brendan O'Brien remix like years later? Because I guess they weren't, or maybe not all of them were not super happy with the original mix or whatever, because it was very reverby. But I love the original mix. I think it's what makes it stand out.
It is a vibe. It's,
yeah.
You know, it's a commitment, right? Like, you're making that choice. Now, I think I have the utmost respect for Brendan O'Brien. As a matter of fact, he went to like almost the opposite on some of the other records following that, where he got him like bone dry in your face. And he's very efficient. He can mix a record in no time. It's very impressive.
I'm
He was actually
sure.
working in the studio in the like Studio A, and we were in Studio B for I don't know, some another record. I don't remember what it was.
Wow. So cool, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
I could go on and on just about this record with you,
Yeah.
but
Hey, like I said, I had a small part of it, a small
yeah,
part in the whole making of it, because the album was done. You know, Brian and I, you know, we still communicate, and it was a good run, man. It was very cool.
And I
well,
suppose that being at number 4 was a happily ever after for many.
I mean,
indeed, man.
I know that you don't agree with the but you know that's why we hopefully will remain a democracy, right? Like,
That's right,
I
man.
hope so, yeah.
It stands the test of time, baby. And yeah, great voting, guys. So now that brings us to number 3. Achtung Baby by U2, also from 1991. Possibly the greatest year in music history, I'm just going to say. And there's a lot of great years in the 70s and 60s, but 91, man, what a year. And U2 just coming out of the gate, after the Joshua Tree, technically also after Rattle and Hum. And this is, as Bono described it, the sound of them chopping down the Joshua Tree, which, I mean, the balls on these guys to just like do an about face on what made them huge and say, okay, now we're going to go like industrial slash electronic and ironic, and bring in this other producer Flood into the mix with also of course Brian Eno and Daniel Lanois. And it worked in such an amazing way. Of course Bono as well created this alternate ego, the Fly, with the sunglasses that still have not left his face since. And just the Fly being the first single off this record, with the Edge like just doing this like almost Hendrix Guitar Hero style guitar, and the grooves by Adam Clayton on this record. Like the bass is almost everything on this album. Mysterious Ways has like just that's actually the song that sucked me into U2. Like I already knew of them, but that just riff that sounds like the Edge has dropped his guitar, and that amazing bass line by Adam. It's just so sexy, and Bono's vocals, again, like a pop song essentially. But for me, and I could list every song on this album. I think it's a perfect album. It's on my wall of perfect albums behind me. But one is my favorite song of all time, for multiple reasons. I mean, I think it's just got a haunting melody, the guitar riff. I mean, it's simple chords, but just the way that it's played and the way it builds with the strings coming in the second half, and just everything that Bono's saying. It was one of those songs that connected with me in a way that I can't. I used to like listen to this in the dark by myself as a teenager and think like, am I the only one doing this? But surely not, because this song is just like transcends space and time. And yeah, it's amazing, and it deserves to be this high, if not higher. And yeah, that's all I got to say for now.
Yeah, I mean, look, I know that this is your number 1 album of the 90s, and look, I had it in my top 20. So I didn't have it this high, but I absolutely love this record. I think it's U2's finest hour, bringing in those elements of industrial rock, especially on the opening Zoo Station, which is such a brilliant way to open this album and introduce us to the new U2, because I think this blows like almost every other record that they have out of the water. And then, of course, even better than the real thing, talking about you know, just those pop hooks and the give me one more chance and you
You'll
won't
be
be denied. I
denied.
mean,
Yeah.
it's just so catchy right from the get. One obviously is obviously the standout for many people. It's not my favorite track, but I know a lot of people say it's their favorite U2 song, like you saying it's your favorite song of all time. And I just absolutely love, you know, the whole message of unity and them kind of like almost breaking up the band, and then the song kind of unites them as one. And of course, so many brilliant lines where he's like, or Bono saying it's like, "Have you come here to play Jesus to the lepers in your head?" I mean, that line has always stood out to me as being beyond brilliant. And I think this album features Bono's best lyrics by far. And I think that is more than evident on my favorite song on the album, "Who's Gonna Ride Your Wild Horses." I know that's not a lot of people's favorite, but I can really relate to that song on a
Great
personal
song.
level, and it
Yeah.
just in some ways it unfortunately reflected some of the situations in my own life. But I mean, just that line, you know, you're an accident waiting to happen. You're a piece of glass out on the beach. I mean, and then of course that song hook, that "Who's gonna ride your wild horses?" I mean, come on. If you didn't think Bono was a great singer by this point, I mean, what planet are you living on? I mean, just one of the best rock vocalists of the 80s and the 90s, and then, you know, so on and so forth. Of course, you said mentioned "The Fly" is a great one. Of course, "Mysterious Ways" is as soon as I heard that song, I was like, oh, I know this. Just that soaring hook, I just absolutely love. You know, she moves in mysterious ways. I mean, it really is a pop song, and it's fine. So, and I love that kind of distortion that comes on right before the chorus. You know, the blown out guitars from the Edge, which I don't know if he's ever sounded better. Maybe on a couple songs on Joshua Tree, but that's about it. And then, of course, I mean, "Ultraviolet," "Light My Way," yet again, another amazing song. I just think the introspective nature of this album, I think really is why it has related to so many people, and just so, you know, obviously being their best album, I think musically, the hooks are just beyond anything they've done, except maybe the first three songs on Joshua Tree. I do have to mention those. And of course, I think for me personally, the reason it isn't higher, like in my top 10 or something, not that the last two songs, I think all the songs are really good, but I feel like "Acrobat" and "Love Is Blindness" kind of just bring it down. Like when I'm listening to this album, it just doesn't, not bring it down, but like bring me down in a way that I feel like they don't really stack up against all the other songs on this album, that I'm kind of like, oh, that was weird. But I'm like, these are good songs. I don't know. It's just for me
They'll grow
personally.
on you, trust me.
What, I don't know. I mean, I've listened a couple times, but we'll have to see. But regardless, I mean, this definitely, even though I had it a bit lower, I think this absolutely deserves a spot in the top 10, and I'm cool with it being this high, number 3.
I totally agree. It should be. I I'm very heavily in this camp, being high.
Mm-hmm.
This,
Yeah.
this record came out. It was like you said. It was, oh, it was a little change of pace. Um, and but we've been watching this evolution of U2 and Bono, from the skinny mullet kid to The Fly, right? Like this thing, you're like, no, this is the shit. This is it. This is.
No.
And "Mysterious Ways" to me is just one of the greatest rock songs ever.
Yeah.
And I will say that one's one of the greatest ballads ever written. I have the utmost respect for this band and their sound, the vibe. I'm a big fan.
Yeah. It's so good. My wife actually got me Bono's new memoir for Christmas, and I just finished it a few days ago. I flew through it because it's so good. But he spends a good deal of time during the Octung days, not really revealing anything that I didn't already know. But it is, like, as Nathaniel alluded to, just amazing that these guys were pushing each other on to a degree where they were almost breaking up. And, you know, they started recording in Berlin, where, of course, Bowie and several other people had made some huge albums to get a vibe there, and it wasn't going well. And then out of thin air, one comes along, and it's like, literally unites them. And I mean, that alone is just incredible. But to me, every song, I mean, Acrobat and Love Is Blindness, they're on the darker side, but that's kind of why I love them. And one other thing I wanted to mention about Bono vocally on this album is like on songs like Even Better Than the Real Thing, he's singing almost in like that Lou Reed lower tone, but he's also mixed in a falsetto above it. And it's like just such a beautiful dichotomy
Take me
that,
higher.
yeah,
Yeah,
no one was doing that. It's just, oh my God. I could go on and on about it.
yeah. And I think it's
But
interesting mentioning like where they were. That it feels like I feel like the best albums come from the most tension. I mean, we look at Rumors, and that's Fleetwood Mac's best album, just for
sure.
example. And then of course you could even throw in the argument Kid A. You know, so I
Yeah.
really think that even though there might be a Radiohead album I like more, I really do think that it is a statement on just how much these guys were pushing each other, but in this case ended up being for the best and really making one of the most iconic albums from the 90s.
One love, man. All
It's
right.
game changer.
Absolutely. So the guys, now that brings us all the way to number two.
OK Computer by none other than Radiohead from 1997. I mean, look, believe it or not, I must be crazy for putting it this low, but this like barely missed out on my top 10. I know, woe is me. But come on, I mean, this is one of the most like groundbreaking albums of all time, and certainly of the 90s. Look, I mean, obviously the Bends, I've already said, you know, how I feel about the Bends. I do need to come back to it, but this to me was when I really was like, oh, this is what everybody was talking about with Radiohead. Man, and I really will say I do really like Airbag a lot. I don't think there's like really I, I want to say many weak tracks on this album, but it is a really good song. But once I got to Paranoid Android, that one I was just like,
Oh,
what
yeah.
the hell is this? It really is been called their Bohemian Rhapsody, and I think with good reason. And of course, we have to give some of the background here too. They went and recorded this album at the what it was in a church, right? It was like it says Saint Catherine's Court. I think that was the place, right? And
Or yeah, either a church or a castle or something, and that was
right,
supposedly haunted by ghosts. Yeah.
which is crazy because most of this album is done live. And you listen to the sonic textures. Yeah, like you listen to the sonic textures on this thing. You listen to the proficiency of their playing, and you're just like, how talented do these guys have to be? I mean, really, I think you guys know. I think Radiohead is one of the greatest bands of all time. And I mean, if this song isn't proof, of course, they're just kind of like this paranoia ensuing, you know. And of course, that android voice is like, I am not paranoid, I am an android. You just hear it kind of like flittering in the background. And then, of course, the whole, you know, like the thing with the king like going off and like beheading these people, and then you go into the second half where they're like doing this kind of like Gregorian-esque like chant, just so beautiful. And then Tom, you're going, rain down, rain down, come on. I mean, maybe his best vocal performance ever. At least it's up there. I mean, come on. This is a magnum opus of a song. And I don't even know if it is my favorite song on this album, because I really love personally Subterranean Homesick Alien. And just because I think OK Computer is like the closest thing we've gotten to Dark Side of the Mood since that came out. And I think this song proves it with the guitar textures. I mean, Johnny Greenwood, I don't, it might have been Ed O'Brien just going off and like making these wild, wild sounds that sound like they're just floating off into outer space, just like the alien. And just Tom York's lyrics about kind of, you know, feeling like you don't fit in with the place you grow up in, and then the aliens come to this guy and kind of feel like they're enlightening him in some way. It is such, I feel like anybody who feels kind of like alienated from where they grew up in, I know I can certainly relate to that in some regard, is going to relate to the song. But I just think the sonic texture on here once again are so beyond anything I've ever heard. Of course, exit music for a film, which was used in the Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet for some reason. So it ended up being exit music for a film. But the most acoustic
For some
driven
reason, it was good.
for some
For
reason.
some reason, yeah.
I I have my thing with Baz Luhrmann, but we could
Okay.
save that for another time. But this song is so brilliant, and of course, I think some of the darkest lyrics that Tom York has ever penned, so hauntingly beautiful and heartbreaking. Of course, I just feel like this whole album is such a great concept album about being drained by society, that 9 to 5, and just trying to find your place amongst this world that's kind of like shaping you to be like one thing and just kind of have a whole herd mentality. You get that so beautifully on Let Down. Of course, Karma Police is obviously one of the biggest songs, one of Radiohead's biggest songs, and that's saying something being on this album. And of course, just that whole core of like judgment, and then finding your core of humanity, and the where he's like singing for a minute there, I lost myself, I lost myself, I lost myself. I mean, just yet
So
again
good.
another dude, such another brilliant performance from Tom York. I mean, such a beautiful singer. Of course, Fit or Happier, which is the one Radiohead song where it's not Tom York singing, and it's so disturbing hearing all this monotonous stuff. It's also hysterical in some ways, like "Don't kill spiders" or whatever the robot voice is saying.
Yeah.
But it's just so disturbing, and I think he said, "I'm so glad I didn't sing on our most disturbing song." No Surprises with the Glockenspiel. Oh my goodness, one of the most haunting. It's the melody's so lush and so languid, but it just is one of the most depressing songs about kind of like losing your all, hope in your life, and no alarms, no surprises, man. Then Lucky, of course. I mean, just, obviously such a great message about, you could be at the top of your game, you could be high on life, and then you could just come crashing down at any minute. I have a feeling my lucks will change. And then, of course, The Tourist closing this thing out. I mean, what a better way to close out this album, telling you just slow down, enjoy your life. And I just think this album, as I said, from a sonic level, there was nothing like it in rock music. Radiohead is really one of the only bands, I think, from the past 30 years who've even pushed the sound of music forward, like really innovators like no other. Because I feel like in a lot of ways, you hear a lot of music that's popular now, and nothing's really pushing that envelope. That's not to say everybody isn't, but I think Radiohead, without question, was one of the few bands from the past 30 years to do that. One of the most influential bands of all time. And I will say, some of these songs, I think like Electioneering, I like all right, but I think the production on Tom York's vocals and maybe his accent too, it's hard to understand him sometimes. Not a huge fan of Climbing Up the Walls. I just think his voice is so drowned in the mix. So that's why it probably didn't make my top 10. But besides that, I mean, I really can't argue this at all. I mean, this is such an iconic album, and I can see why it's at number 2. I mean, what
Yeah.
else?
I mean, it's so ahead of its time. Again, obviously, I'm in tune with this list because you see it right behind me. And the first time I heard it, I was so like I couldn't quite get into it or find an entry point until the end of the album, when the tourist, he keeps screaming over and over again, "Hey man, slow down, idiot, slow down." And then I got it, thematically of what this album was about. And again, this came out in 97, and they're talking about us being so connected, but so disconnected. And does that ring any bells? And it's like,
It's so predicative of the
yeah.
future.
Oh my God. And I was going to say, not to say you're wrong about Tom York's vocals on those couple songs, but
Yeah.
I feel like he is so amazing on this record because in every song it's like a different Tom York. And Climbing Up the Walls, for example, like and I got to witness this live when they played on the Amnesiac tour. He's screaming into his acoustic guitar hole on that song, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's how they did it live on the record as well. And it's just like all these different textures, not just sonically, but the emotion that he puts behind it, just incredible. And of course, Johnny Greenwood, the sounds that he gets out of those guitars on some songs are just unearthly and incredible. And I mean, you said it all, but just it's one of those albums that you kind of have to listen to as a whole. But then there's other songs that, like Karma Police, I can listen to any day of the week, and it's such a banger, you know. But yeah, absolutely deserves to be number two, and so glad it's here.
I concur. I too was late to the Radiohead parade. Um, Loved the groundbreaking sound, change of sound from what was happening at the time.
Mhm.
Didn't listen to it top to bottom.
Really?
Heard a couple bits here and there, and then kept hearing more and more. And so it took me a while to get through the whole thing.
Hmm.
And I don't believe I ever listened to it top to bottom in one sitting.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow. I'm
Interesting.
shocked.
Yep.
Wow.
Maybe one of my greatest weaknesses. I don't know, but that I just didn't.
Of time.
But I
It's
love.
a lot to take in one sitting. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
but you know the beauty of, and this is something you guys are touching on that I think is lost in today's single world, is so many of these albums, and certainly half the ones that are in on your wall, and every one that we're talking about today is a collection that needs to be experienced together. These aren't individual ideas. These are, I'm not talking about concept albums. It's not The Wall. It's a
Right.
collection of time where this person or this group of people were at that time in their lives. And that's the beauty. That's the art of songwriting and production. You go through it together. That's where you are at the time. You may look back at it like we were saying, how the band's sounds have changed and how this production style changed. Well, that's where they were at the time, and there's something to be said for that. So for Radiohead, they hit this out of the park. This was the groundbreaking sounds that we needed, because again, just like getting out of the 80s, we also had to get past everybody sounding in the grunge world. We had to move on from that too. And that was a big swing at it right there. That was a big impact.
Yeah.
Right.
That's where
I
that
think,
line from, oh, sorry, in Karma Police comes from. Buzzing like a fridge is how Tom York described a lot of the music, even their own, like
yeah.
from early 90s, that they
Right.
had to get past.
Yeah.
And I think you make a great point, Patrick, about them kind of like the albums being an experience. Because can you imagine listening to Fitter Happier like without the album, just listening on your own? Like that'd be so bizarre. Like why would you want to do that? But it
Right.
works so well on the album. And yeah, like really they changed the game, obviously, you know, coming from their grunge style, because I think their first album they were almost indistinguishable from any other grunge band except for Creep. And then obviously the Bends I still feel like is almost you can definitely see there's something more there. But I think that this was when it was just like nothing had ever been heard, and then they continued and continued to
Right.
evolve and you know change their sound and just innovate in so many new ways. I really do think, if I haven't said it already, I think Radiohead was the best band to come out of the 90s without question. And I think, you know, maybe I don't want to say the best rock group together today, because who knows if they're making music, and you know, half of the Who is intact. But really, I mean, if they put out an album, I would say Radiohead is still the best rock band making music today.
I do not have to hear Creep ever again.
You're one of those guys, huh?
And it's not because of the original, it's because of how many times we've heard it, other people just butcher it.
And then
Yeah.
Tom York even did.
Yeah.
I didn't hear that, but
Like, ow, yes.
I think he did that on purpose. Yeah.
Oh my Lord. It was just, I'm just, you know, when you get to hear, you know, the middle school band playing it, you're like, no.
Yeah. Yeah. Ridiculous.
way.
But well, hey, we got OK Computer. So guys,
Thank God.
we are already to number one. So here we go. Nevermind by Nirvana, also from 1991. Go figure. And this won the list by quite a few votes, I must say, which I was kind of surprised by, honestly. But at the same time, not really. I mean, just come on, this changed music, not just in the 90s, but pretty much forever. Produced by Butch Vig, you know, taking this grunge rock that was kind of new to the public and making it uh, a bit, obviously it's more polished than In Utero, as we mentioned, but also, I mean, just everything about it. I mean, Kurt Cobain's sense of melody is just incredible on songs like Smells Like Teen Spirit, In Bloom, Come As You Are. Even, you know, the gems on here like Territorial Pissings, which has just some of his most vitriolic screaming at the end of the song, that gotta find a way, a better way. His voice like breaking like mid scream. It's so amazing. Um, you know, just for me, man, when this hit, it was just like there was nothing else. Like I remember literally I'd come home from school, put Nevermind on and play Nintendo for hours and just have it on repeat. And I mean that's all you need in life, right? So yeah, I mean you've got ballads like Polly. I mean, just every single song on here is beautiful. It changed the landscape of music in such an amazing way. Knocked off all the 80s hair rockers, and you know, some of them eventually came around to realize why. And you know, it's just it's always going to be one of the best. I mean, what else can you say? But I know you got a lot to say.
Oh yeah, I mean this was actually I think it was number 4 on my list, but I mean come on, I mean this is I don't think there's any album that's more deserving of number 1 if we're being quite honest. I mean this is one of the most iconic albums of all time. It's always been ranked as such, and with good reason. And especially the album cover, which has gotten a lot of heat lately. And you know, I think people forget about artistic integrity. And it's just so funny to me that it's like that baby is now following the money. That's it's like
Yeah.
it's so
Yeah.
prophetic. It's so beautiful. But yeah, I mean, this album, as you said, changed music overnight when it came out. And I think Patrick has a good story about this later on that he'll tell. But yeah, I mean, Smells Like Teen Spirit. My goodness, one of the greatest songs of all time. I know, like, you know, I got the shirt. I'm not a Nirvana poser. You know, I think you know this at this point, but it is my favorite Nirvana song. I still think it's just that anthem of, you know, apathy. I mean, really, it is such a generational landmark of a song. And I mean, just one of, yet again, you know, he's really creating these pop songs with really kind of like hard edge guitars and drums, with Dave Grohl just going crazy, maybe the best drummer from that era. I mean, oh my goodness. And then you saw what he went on to do, made this list a couple of other times. And of course, just all these songs, I just love Kurt Cobain's cryptic, mysterious, and contradicting lyricism, especially on In Bloom, you know, talking about how, you know, a lot of these kids, they don't really, you know, they don't really know what these songs mean. That amazing hook. It's like, he's the one who likes all pretty song, you know, and I just think you could sing along to most of these songs and sound like Lithium, with of course such that amazing bass riff from Chris Novoselic, and
Oh,
I mean,
that's
so
my
iconic.
favorite song on the album, actually.
Hey,
It's
I
so
mean,
good.
it's one of my favorites as well. And just that I'm so happy because
'Cause
today I
today I
found
found
my
my
friends
friends
in
in
my
my
head.
head.
And I
Oh,
feel like Kurt Cobain has never sounded better. Maybe it's the Melodyne, but it definitely has to do something with Butch Vig. I mean, you really get why he was such a voice
There was,
of
there was no
he
Melodyne.
no,
there wasn't.
exactly. No.
Wow, that's how I was speculating for a while because it's he sounds so good, but I mean I think that tells you just how great of a vocalist Kurt Cobain was overall. I mean, just he was the voice of a generation like Dylan was in the 60s, but you know, even though I said he isn't technically the greatest singer, he was definitely a better singer than Dylan
And
for
he
sure.
did double his vocals quite a bit on the
Maybe
album.
that was it
And
too.
that also is impressive as hell, because to double yourself in key without Melodyne is a feat in itself.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Like I really think then it's even more impressive to me that he's never sounded as clean or on this record, and you still get that rawness when he's screaming, and as you said before, it's so tuneful, and I don't think there's many singers I could listen to scream like that except Kurt Cobain, maybe a few others. Of course, Breed is another absolute amazing song I have to mention. You could talk about all these. Polly is maybe the most disturbing song in their catalog. I mean, just starting off with Polly want a cracker, I guess I should get off her first. I mean, it's just so disturbing, like writing the song for the perspective of a rapist. I mean, it is just so disturbing. Really one of their best songs from a songwriting standpoint. Territorial Pissings. I'm so glad, because we've disagreed so much on this countdown, but I'm so glad you love that song, because I've always loved
Love
that
it.
song, and just how absolute nuts it is when he's just screaming on that. Drain You, of course, you got to mention. I think we have to. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Something in the Way. Just, such a change of pace from the rest of this album with the cello and just the really kind of like slow and brooding. I think brooding is a good word for it, especially because it was used in the
What?
Batman last year.
Yeah, yeah.
And just his delivery is so kind of like strained, and just the underneath the bridge, it's like he feels like he's holding something back, and he's portraying the darkness of it so well. And it's okay to eat fish because they don't have any feelings. Just remember that. But really, I
Mhm.
think such a great way to end this album, unless you listen to Endless Nameless, which wasn't on the original vinyl, but I love that song as well. I mean, talk about him screaming, like that is maybe one of his like craziest vocal performances. But you know despite all the melodies being great, everything about this album is just absolutely incredible. As I said, you really can't have anything above this album when it comes to the '90s. Just overall, it is a cultural landmark, and I think it will remain that way till the end of time.
You are correct. And again, timing's everything, right?
Yeah.
So this was again 91. We're coming out of that era. Things were changing. Now, if we think back to the creative process, or think about the creative process, these guys were already creating this, 12 months earlier, maybe more. So
Mhm.
that shows, if you think of it that way, just how far ahead they really were.
Yeah.
And thank God they made the record when they did. It was, if Pearl Jam was the launching pad of grunge, then Nirvana was the moonshot, right? It was like it just took this new genre, we'll call it, and just went boom, and it's everywhere. Just a I'm glad this is number one. I think this is the for me, a 10-year period might be a bit of a stretch to categorize things, but it's easy, right? It's like, it was like, we'll pick those numbers, but certainly the first 3/4 of the 90s, this is the soundtrack.
Oh yeah, for sure. And MTV had such a big part in that too. Like when the Teen Spirit video hit, they were playing that every half hour, it
Yeah.
seemed like. And to the point where like I loved it, but it wasn't until like I got the moodier Come As You Are that I was like, okay, now I'm a fan. Like these guys are just so far beyond what they're just being pushed as, so
Yeah,
good.
and I think just we've been talking about, even when we aren't talking about Nirvana, I mean, especially that whole last episode, who do we keep bringing up? Kurt Cobain. And
Right.
it's just so crazy to think that this was just him like wanting to express himself in the best way he could, and just somehow he related to a whole generation of people, and then he was kind of like kind of put on that pedestal, right? And how it absolutely destroyed him. Because as tragic as it is, I mean, without question, he is the most iconic figure from the '90s. I mean, how can you argue that? I mean, you see Kurt Cobain on t-shirts to this day. You hear people talk about Kurt Cobain all the time. And I think by all accounts a really like decent guy. I mean, there's some things you might hear about him that are a little, but I think his heart was in the right place. He was doing so many things with such a sense of kind of humbleness and humanity and wit. And I don't think anybody, there weren't that many people who seemed to understand life as well as Kurt Cobain, and maybe he didn't even understand it, obviously, since he committed suicide. But I really feel like from a grounded, down to earth perspective, I mean, there was nobody like Kurt Cobain, and I think that's probably why he connected with so many people and ended up being that cultural icon.
Absolutely. And Patrick, from a production standpoint, how do you feel about this album, or when it came out? What did it mean to you as far as that goes?
Yeah, again, it jumped off the radio. It sounded great. The team that put it together, obviously Butch Vig, but just made this. Yeah, this is wow.
Yeah, this is Butch Vig. Yes, yes.
Wow, had a moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it jumped off the radio. It was a moment, and again, it's the appropriate sound for the songs, and it's easy to say in retrospect, but there's not all songs that you listen to 20 years later that you go, yeah, that's what it should have sounded like. This is one for sure. They killed it. They killed it, and it's got a really, you'd mentioned the use of a cello on a grunge record. Like what is that? Like
Right.
it's supposed to be guitars and thrash and all this stuff, and they chose, and somebody made the choice to add these different instruments, and that's beautiful. That's the beauty of we don't have to sit here in just this one shell, this one outline, or stay within the lines of this genre. They did, and I personally think that's one of the reasons why the record jumps the way it does. But it's a great record. It's a top to bottom great record.
Yeah, it's absolutely timeless. I mean, really,
Oh, yeah.
there's not a better word for it.
Yeah.
30 years later, we're still talking about it as one of the best.
Yeah, there are teenagers walking around today that love this record.
Yeah.
We're obviously born well after it came out.
Right.
And I think that really stands out too. Like when you call it timeless, like it's easy to call something timeless, like
Sure.
if it's
Sure.
Nick Drake or Cat Stevens, like something that's very earthy. But for something that's this, just big sounding, to still sound this big this many years later, it's really something. So great pick, guys. Wow. I mean,
Yeah.
this list, you can say what you want about like the bottom half. We've had a lot of discussions, but the top 5, you cannot deny these albums, man.
Well, I went on my thing, but yeah, it's iconic. So, what can
You
I
didn't
say?
walk out at least.
No, I respect it. I respect it. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Well, now we can real quick just say I've been airing my grievances as we've been going as far as what I think was missing from this list, because there were actually quite a few. But the one thing that I forgot to mention is there's no Lenny Kravitz on this list at all. And
Wow.
I would have thought at least Are You Gonna Go My Way would have made it. But there were multiple great Lenny albums in this decade, 5 and Mama Said, and none of them are on here. And I don't know what the hell happened, but
Well,
what
I
are you
haven't
gonna
listened
do?
to them yet, so maybe that's part of the problem, and I should probably do my due
You need
diligence
to rectify
at
that.
some
Yeah.
point. Yeah.
How
Well,
many
I
times
don't
did you
have.
vote?
What's that?
How many times did you vote?
Well, 90 times, one for each album.
Yeah.
No, but I will say I don't have too many grievances because I think most of the albums I love ended up making the list. But one group I do have to mention first off, The Roots. I
Yeah.
would have, I would have thought that Things Fall Apart or Philadelphia Half-Life would have made the list, but didn't get enough votes, I suppose. But I think after Tribe, I mean, probably the best hip hop band really of the 90s. The fact that they're doing their own stuff, and Questlove laying down the groove. So I definitely think those albums should have made the list, or at least one of them. Another big snub for me was Listen Without Prejudice Volume 1 by George Michael. I mean, I was shocked that didn't make the list, because George Michael, obviously Faith made the 80s list. And I think that this is an even better album than Faith, really moving out of that 80s sound and diversifying a bit. Obviously, Freedom 90 is like the best George Michael song of all time. But I think the whole record from top to bottom is exceptional, and I'm surprised like I was the only one who voted for it. I mean, that's kind of nutty, but if you guys haven't listened yet, please do yourself a favor, listen to that album. I mean, George Michael, what a legend. And another thing I was shocked by, because I often go back to when I did the Nathaniel Ahart and Company's, top 100 series. There's two albums from the 90s that were on that list that didn't make this list, and that was Life After Death by the Notorious B.I.G. and Spiderland by Slint. And Spiderland made the top 50. And maybe it was because maybe not all the people were voting on this series, which is why Spiderland, it was on my list, but was a bit lower down because it is very raw, very lo-fi. But I was really shocked because that's such an influential math rock album. And also, I mean, obviously everyone loves Biggie here, it seems. So I was shocked at the Life After Death didn't, but I was okay with that because it's a bloated
At least he
album.
made it on the
Yeah,
list.
you got to have Ready to Die, but I thought
Yeah.
that would have made it as well.
Sure.
But
Well, overall, man, can't that came out great, I think. And
yeah.
and man, what a final guest to have, man. I wish
man.
we could just go on and pick your brain more and more here, Patrick, but we want to be respectful of your time. And thank you for all the stories. We may even have some little snippets off of this video to talk about off the air too. So great stuff, man.
Yeah, thanks a lot for coming on, Patrick. It really means a lot to us, and I'm so glad we could have someone who was there for it all to kind of like give us his insight.
Well, I was there for part of it, and I was new, I was young, I was still learning. Again, I give all the credit to Brian Malouf, who I worked with and is my mentor, and he's my guy, and all the records we worked on. And we worked on a lot of records together for 5 years. We were attached, and that was, we had a great run. We mixed Amy Grant's Baby Baby, Roxette's Joyride, Extreme, More Than Words.
Wow.
Than these. I mean,
great song.
At one time, I gave Brian the framed Billboard top 100. We had 5 songs in the top 25 or something like that. Yeah. It was a pretty good run, man, and he's the man. And I don't know if he gets as much credit as he deserves, because he was that good at everything that he did. And I worked for him. Like I said, we were together. We were together way more than we were with our families. Let's put it that way.
Wow,
man. Yeah, we worked every day, man.
Testament to hard work, man. Right?
It was great.
Yeah.
It was great. Awesome. And you know what? You strike while the iron's hot too. You're in demand. You keep plugging. And but I love him. He's a great guy, great producer, and great friend. And his impact in the 90s is obviously pretty huge.
Yeah. I mean, you forget how big or what a great song Baby Baby was. Amy Grant just got her induction from not the Rock Hall of Fame, but the Kennedy Center honors. Right. And seeing them sing it to her, it was just like, it was beautiful, man.
Yeah. Really awesome.
And to mention More Than Words, I mean, we didn't talk about Extreme, but like I love that song. That's like one of the best harmony songs of all time. I feel it's just amazing.
Really,
it really is. And that was again a single, and we had to cut that song down. I don't know if you've heard the album version, but it's like 7 minutes.
Yeah.
So we're like cutting tape, like to cut a verse out here and a chorus and I don't even remember, but we were chopping pieces out of that to try to get it down to length. So yeah, it was
wow. That was like 1990 when that came out, or
something? Yeah, it had to be right around there because it's amazing. We did that was all right around the same time. Yeah, Seal's Crazy.
Great time. Oh my God, that's one of my favorite songs ever, man.
Yeah, there were like 7 remixes of that. So if there's an entire CD of Crazy.
I love. There's so many great songs called Crazy, but to me, Seal's Crazy is the best. Yeah, I just love. I think it's amazing, stripped down acoustic, but the production on that track, man, this is amazing.
Trevor Horn.
I'm like,
I don't know. I was just a cog in the wheel, man. It's like, but it was great. It was great to be involved with it. it was really great to be part of it. That part,
Freaking Seal should have been on the list too, by the way.
Oh, see, that's a
I
good
didn't mention
segue.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Great
I'm just
album.
saying.
Right. You might want to say something.
I
Yeah.
might want to throw that one in there just a little bit.
Yeah, that guy's amazing, dude. But well, we could go on, but Patrick, thank you
Yeah,
again,
thank you
man.
guys. I
And
appreciate it, and you guys are killing it. This is awesome. You
Thank
guys,
you, man.
your knowledge of what's taking place on all these records is more than admirable. It's impressive.
I appreciate that so
Yeah.
much, man. And guys, this is not the end by any means. We will eventually get into the 21st century, but as a duo, we're taking a little break. But that doesn't mean that you can stop, because Nathaniel Ahart is doing the top 100 movies of all time, and you got to get your listen to him by January 20th. So please do that and be on the lookout for his countdown on his channel in the
Yeah,
very near future.
it's going to be great. I'll try to get John on here and some really hopefully some big guests. We're still seeing how that pans out, but I'm so beyond looking forward to this one because I've been wanting to do a movie countdown for a long time. So please, if you haven't at this point, I mean, I don't know why I'm even saying this, but subscribe to my channel, please, if you haven't. It's going to be
Please.
great. We're going to have so far the list is looking really solid. There might be one movie I want to kick off, but if we get more votes in, we will. And yeah, so just so looking forward to that, and thank you guys for tuning in all this time. I mean, whether we agree with all the picks on the list, because I've had my say, but we really do love your contributions and really respect your opinions overall. So thank you for being a part of this journey with us and really making this series what it is, because we don't do this if it weren't for you.
Absolutely. Guys, we love you all. So we will see you on the next one, and take care. Peace.
See you later.